Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And I'm very excited to introduce my guest today. It is Christine Herbert. Hello, Christine.
Hi, Anna. Nice to meet you.
And I'm excited to introduce Christine because she is the author of this gem. It is called Digestion, the Key to Good Health, Gastrointestinal Well-Being Using Herbs and Natural Healing. I almost feel like I can't thank you enough for writing this book to begin with.
Well,
Um,
thank you.
I've been telling everybody who will listen to me all about it. And the reason is it has absolutely the best description of the digestive system and how it works that I have ever come across. So I think that alone is a reason for people to rush out to get this book. But you don't stop there because you also go on to explain what the microbiome is and what it does. So maybe because this interview for me has been one of the hardest to kind of organize in my head because there's so much I want to ask you. So I suspect I may be asking you to come back, Christine, because it can't all be done in one go. And I thought the best place to begin would be with the guts microbiome.
Mhm.
So we hear that word a lot, but it would be good to get a real sense of exactly what it is. So over to you.
Okay, well, the microbiome of the gut. So we have microbiomes right throughout our body. We've got a microbiome in the mouth. We have a microbiome on the skin. We might have a microbiome in the vagina. And they all have their own jobs and they're all really important. But the gut microbiome has enormous number of jobs. It's completely linked to whole body health. Um, it's even linked with healthy brain function. So the gut microbiome and the brain have this bidirectional communication all the time. They talk to each other all the time and they keep each other healthy. So it's so important for everything to do with our body that the gut microbiome is healthy. It has many different bacteria, viruses, fungi. It's got these weird little things called archaea in. It's got loads of different beasties in that we actually probably don't know about too. You know, it's an uncovering story, the microbiome. It's vital for digestion. It's even vital for choosing the foods we eat. If we have the wrong bugs in our microbiome, they're telling us they want more sugar, right? So they are making us crave sugar. They're making us crave things we really shouldn't be eating. So if we've got the wrong microbiome, it even affects what we eat. It's very linked with metabolic health. So, for example, weight gain is very linked with a healthy microbiome, with an unhealthy microbiome, sorry. Um, Diabetes, heart disease, you name it, that there are links between microbiome health and the whole of the body. Um, it's it can be disrupted by many things. So a disrupted microbiome is called dysbiosis. And a dysbiosis can be caused, I mean, the classic one is when you give people antibiotics. That obviously kills off a lot of the microbiome and messes it up. And everybody knows that one. And that's why, people go and eat yogurts. And that's been known for a long time. We need more than yogurt. But, it's a good starting point. But it can also be disrupted by our hormones. If our hormones are out of kilter, it can be disrupted by medication. all sorts of medication. It can be disrupted. I'm trying to think all the things it can be disrupted. There's many, many things it can be disrupted by. So, you know, it's so important to keep it healthy and well, for sure. Yeah.
It kind of, there was one that surprised me that you talked about, and that was sleep. The fact that irregular sleep patterns can actually affect the microbiome. And out of all the things that you might have suggested that to me, that's the one that's really surprised me. Although, of course, I would be looking at sleep for any other number of issues. But to find it connecting with the microbiome was really a very big surprise. And the numbers of these little critters that are in our microbiome are just staggering. I wrote down, 38 trillion cells.
That's right. That's right. It's amazing. I'm just checking through my book because off the top of my head, I can't remember the numbers, but it's quite incredible.
And that was just one, the 38 trillion cells, but these are just bacteria. Then there's all the others that you've added, which I thought, wow, that's
There's more cells. There's more cells in our microbiome than there are in our bodies. Many, many more.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's like a little universe that's within us, and that's just in the gut. Because as you point out, there are others in other parts of the body. I want to bring you back to the mouth because the mouth is a very important part of the digestive system. So, and you talked about there being a microbiome in the mouth itself. So can you tell us about that, please?
Well, the microbiome in the mouth, I mean, it's there to protect our mouth because it just helps. It helps us to digest. It helps us to protect what's there. So if you have the wrong microbiome in the mouth, then nothing will happen as it should do. We've got enzymes and saliva and juices all going on in the mouth to digest. And it protects it. It has up to 700 different kinds of microbe in the mouth. And what we do, we go along and use alcohol mouthwashes, and that kills them all. We shouldn't use products like alcohol mouthwashes that kill all the microbiome. We need that to protect our gums. It prevents periodontal disease. It just keeps the mouth healthy. So, mouthwash is not great.
It's interesting that you talk about it preventing, protecting the gums and protecting us from periodontal disease, because the very thing that people are using mouthwashes for is to supposedly help prevent gum disease. So, and yet, actually, that's not necessary. And then we're using fluoride, which is another one that is going to kill everything in the mouth. Well, maybe this is a good point to ask then. What should we be doing to clean our teeth and to clean our mouths?
Well, I think a small amount of fluoride is okay if the water is not already fluoridated. So certainly in the UK, in some areas, water is already heavily fluoridated, sometimes naturally. And then you don't need it in toothpaste. There are some healthy toothpastes around, some green toothpastes, if you like, that you can buy that are not nearly so disruptive to the mouth flora. You can use a mouthwash if you use the right one. So I make a herbal mouthwash for if someone has gum disease. I make a herbal mouthwash with oak bark, which is astringent and dries. That helps to tonify the gums so that you don't get those pockets. And it often has sage in and myrrh, which are antiseptic, but not nearly as strongly antiseptic as some of the commercial mouthwashes. So you can, and I tend to use aromatic waters instead of tinctures. So instead of alcohol, they tend to have aromatic waters in, which are much more gentle. So yes, you can use mouthwashes, but make them gentle. There's a couple of very good herbal dentistry books about. Are very interesting. If I can reach one, I might be able to. No, I can't. I can put that in. I don't know. I can send that to you. But there are a couple of very interesting herbal dentistry books that are not difficult to find. If you just Google herbal dentistry, and so they know what they're talking about. They're very good on that. Yeah.
So I brought you back to the mouth because I know that this is where the digestion actually begins, and that's why I thought, well, it's good that we address this. The connection between the gut and the brain is absolutely fascinating to me, because there's a clear link between certain mental health conditions and the gut. And you mentioned that the gut's microbiome and the gut is communicating with the brain. So everything communicates with the brain. To that extent, it's not such a big surprise. He's wanting to join in. But I guess what I'm asking is for an explanation of how it works.
Okay.
What is it that makes it even a possible thing that a person's mood might be affected by what's going on in the gut beyond, if they're feeling fine, if they're not, having a stomach ache, or, why is it that is linked?
It's a nerve connection. We've got the enteric nervous system in the gut, which has been called the second brain, and that is linked direct with the brain via neurons and the nerve, the nervous system. And actually, the biggest link is the vagus nerve. So it's about keeping those healthy. It's a lovely little saying, if the gut is on fire, the brain will also be on fire. And I like that, because it just says it all. If the gut isn't happy, it will go to the rest. So anything that affects the gut will affect the brain, and vice versa. So if there's an inflammatory state in the gut, it will affect the brain. It's very commonly seen in people with inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, ulcerative colitis. One of their most important side issues, as well as obviously the inflammatory gut, is depression and anxiety. It's so common. Obviously you can say, well, if your gut's not happy, your brain won't be happy, but it's more than that. There is definitely that link. There's that enteric nervous system. It's a complex network, millions of neurons, and they're embedded in the gastrointestinal wall. So if that wall is inflamed and unhappy, all those messages are going to go up to the brain. It also cooperates with the microbiome. So the enteric nervous system works with the microbiome. And so again, the two have to be happy. When there's dysbiosis, the enteric nervous system doesn't work very well. And so that connection, it's not broken. It sends bad messages. There's also neurotransmitters. So chemicals, in other words, chemical neurotransmitters, things like dopamine, serotonin, catecholamines, and they message between the gut and the brain. So you've got two forms of communication. There's the nerves, the nervous system, and there's also neurotransmitters, the little chemicals that talk to each other. So there's a very strong link. And the thing is, that strong link, you can't always work out what happens first. So is it the gut causing the brain problem, or is it the brain causing the gut problem? I always see it with patients. When I see someone with mental health problems, I think, okay, I can treat the gut much more easily than I can treat the brain. So I start with what I can work with. I start with the gut, and then I see what happens. I've got a nice little do you want a little case study of how that happened? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I saw a young man, a 25-year-old young man, who'd been suffering with anxiety and depression for 8 years. He tried everything. He tried cognitive behavioral therapy, he tried counseling, he tried hypnosis, he'd also tried fluoxetine, so antidepressants. And he felt nothing had helped. And he was tired. He was always tired, especially after eating. Um, Bad sleep. He woke in the morning feeling unrefreshed, and he had a history of ear infections, tonsillitis and sinusitis. So those last three say dairy intolerance to me. And also, if someone's tired after eating, then they've eaten something they shouldn't have done. So I headed straight for food intolerances, and got him off the dairy. His diet was really high in sugar. Anyone who's tired all the time tends to go for sugar, because it's a craving. The body's craving that energy, or energy oomph. So he was drinking loads of cups of tea, each with several teaspoons of sugar in. He was drinking cordial drinks. He was eating loads of refined wheat products, eating pasta and bread and biscuits and cakes and so on and so on. So diet work, obviously. That's where I started. I started with diet work for him. He was young. When someone's young, you can often fix things very quickly by changing their diet. I did give him a flower remedy as well, because I work with flower remedies a lot. I gave him a flower remedy to help immediately with the anxiety and depression. Because if someone is depressed, changing your diet isn't always easy. It's a hard thing to do, especially if you're depressed as well. So flower remedy to give him the energy, the oomph to be able to change his diet. And I suggested he take some probiotics or fermented food, probably probiotics, because that's easier to start with. And then I go to fermented foods. So I saw him again 6 weeks later. And all I'd done, as I say, was flower remedy and diet changes. 6 weeks later, he reported feeling like a new person. He was ready to start reducing his fluoxetine and eventually stop it. And the inflammation, the brain stuff was coming solely from his diet, nothing else. And because he was still young and the inflammation wasn't too entrenched, simply changing his diet was enough to deal with it. It sorted him. I heard, I think about 3 months later, he was doing so well, and that's all I had to do was to address his gut problems, which were coming from diet. And that fixed the brain problems. Simple. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very clear that there is a link there, and you mentioned the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve, of course, the autonomic nervous system, and so of course stress is going to impact on the gut, and vice versa. The gut then is going to add to the stress, if you like. So that breathing is also such an important part of that healthy switching from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic, which is the more restful state.
That's right, yeah.
The brain, and we need that.
Mm-hmm.
So so that's you've made that very, very clear. Something else that is another term that people hear but are not very clear on what it means, and that is the term leaky gut.
Mm-hmm.
So, Christine, how is it possible to have a leaky gut?
Okay, well, if you think about your skin, if you constantly grazing it, inflaming it, if you're constantly hurting skin, the barrier doesn't stay intact, does it? And so if you do that to your internal mucous membranes, if you're hurting it with something that's constantly abrading it, inflaming it, hurting it, it's going to get less intact. Now, the inside of our gut, the whole gut, is lined with epithelial cells that are very tightly close together. Now, those tight junctions actually can come apart for certain things, but it's controlled, and they're not open all the time. But if you damage those epithelial cells, those tight junctions will part, and they'll separate, and the gaps will be bigger. So large molecules can go through, and if large molecules go through, you're much more likely to get reactions from foods, because it's not been digested properly. It's bigger antigen. It's going to create an antigen-antibody reaction and inflammation. So leaky gut is basically when the gaps between the epithelial cells have got bigger, and they're not closing up again as they should do. It's that simple, and it is a real thing. The conventional medics now believe it's true, or that they didn't a few years back. But it's that simple. And so what you have to do is to treat leaky gut, you've got to do two things. First, you've got to take away the thing that's causing it. You've got to get the diet right. And then you add in something that will help to heal it. So there's several things you can use to heal it. There are some herbs that are called, there are some demulcent herbs that will improve mucous membrane health. And some of them are vulneraries. In other words, they help tissue cells to divide and reprocess. And a great one of those is aloe vera. So aloe vera juice is a really useful healer for the gut. Bone broth is a really useful healer for the gut. The only thing with bone broth is that it's very high in histamine, so for some people it's not a great idea. But bone broth is a really useful gut healer. Agrimony is a nice herb it's a favourite of mine for leaky gut, because it's an astringent herb. It's a toning astringent herb, and it will help to close those junctions. It has a side benefit of being bitter and working on the liver as well. So it's a very useful herb for those kind of problems. So there's a few. There's also marshmallow demulcent herb. Marshmallow root, marshmallow leaf is a demulcent herb. Again, starts to heal those mucous membranes. So, I mean, leaky gut, there's probably not many people that don't have some amount of leaky gut, to be honest. And as we get older, we tend to, our guts are never quite as healthy as they should be. Yeah.
What causes this leaky gut?
Well, it's the damage, inflammation. Inflammation in the gut is what causes it. So it's damage from foods that are either inflammatory to everybody, or foods that someone is intolerant to, specifically intolerant to. So there's the two groups. So everybody, the inflammatory foods that everybody will have problems with are wheat, gluten, sugar, pork, oranges. Those are the kind of things, those are the kind of foods that are inflammatory to everybody. If you've got a healthy gut, you can probably eat those foods. But if you haven't got a healthy gut, if you've got inflammation going in already, then those foods are going to be bad, and they're going to cause more inflammation. And then there's the foods that people that are intolerant to, which are the usual primary cause of leaky gut. And they could be, I mean, the most common one is dairy. So I reckon 75% of people I see are dairy intolerant. It's really common. And I'm talking dairy proteins, not lactose. So dairy, gluten, soya, nightshades, salicylates, really common now. Things like that are the things that cause the leaky gut in the first place, and then the inflammatory foods just make it worse. So if you don't change diet, you're never going to fix leaky gut.
No, and I think, a lot of these intolerances also come from the modern hybridization. So the hybridization of wheat, so that the wheat that we are eating has higher gluten than previously. and the dairy that people are drinking are coming from cows that were not providing the milk that our ancestors had. They are, they're not the Guernseys, the Jerseys, which have the protein that is much more familiar and friendly to the human being. So it's a very important thing that we understand that there are two issues. There's the issues of what we've done to our food, and then how we go about navigating through this new landscape of food, or more recent landscape of food.
And also the way we eat. People, it's very easy for someone to eat wheat and dairy 6-8 times a day. That's the other major problem. So I think there's two main reasons for food intolerances. One is, as you say, what they've done, what modern production has done to it, but it's also about how we eat, the way we have those same foods so many times in the day, and that's where the problem comes mostly, I think.
Yeah, the repetition, isn't it? Because our eating patterns are very different to that of our ancestors again.
Yes.
So if we now look at immunity and the immune system, what is the link between that and the gut and the gut microbiome?
Well, it's very linked. So we need a healthy microbiome to have healthy immunity. It's the microbiome. Some of the bacteria in the microbiome are directly involved in IgA production, the antibody IgA production, but they are indirectly linked with the whole immune system. The links are complex, and there's loads of them. And so I'm not sure I can manage to go into them in much detail right now, not without doing some homework. But it's completely, it's completely linked. Our immune system relies on having a healthy microbiome. We need it.
And so it's so clear, isn't it? If the immune system relies on a healthy gut microbiome, and our health and well-being relies largely on our body's ability to have immunity to certain things, again, we're back to the gut and everything, being linked to the gut.
Everything comes to the gut. Yeah, I mean the ancient civilizations knew that. All the ancient medicine people knew that. The Greeks knew it. The Indians knew it. The Chinese knew it. They all knew that if you've got a problem in the body, look at the gut first. Fix the gut, and you may well find that you fix the body. And apart from anything else, it's the easiest thing to fix, the gut. I have seen thousands of people now as patients, and it's just so much easier just to fix that one thing and just see what else is sorted out. So that's the way I always work now. Yeah.
In medical astrology, traditionally, the medical astrologers would have set a chart for the moment in which the person lay down. But if they didn't have that information, they would do it for the moment where the urine test was done or the stools were done. And I think, it just tells you where they were at. They were looking exactly at what's going on in the gut. So we're looking at what's coming out to determine what is going on the inside.
Yeah.
So I think it's, what was that? Was it Aristotle who said, let food be thy medicine,
Yeah.
and medicine be thy food.
Whether it was Aristotle, I don't know. You may well be right. Yeah.
Something along those lines, but I think it was Aristotle. But it's, again, there you have it, that this is something that somehow previous generations knew, and in the 20th century, all of that wisdom has flown out the window, and we can make some educated guesses as to why that particular baby went out with the bathwater.
Yes.
So,
You're absolutely right. Yeah, and it's so simple, and it's cheap medicine, and we don't need all these pharmaceuticals, do we then?
yeah, cheap medicine. I wonder if the profit motive has anything to do with the forgetting.
Couldn't possibly be.
Just asking. Just one other thing that comes up in your book, which is familiar to me again from the idea of medical astrology, and that is of different constitutions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for most people, this is news. So tell us about what is a constitution, and how can there be different constitutions?
Well, you can see it very easily, and when I start describing a constitution, people always say, I know someone like that. So, for example, a hot constitution, someone with a constitution is the way you are. It's the way your body functions, the way you do things. It describes you as an individual, but describing a constitution is a way of putting us into little groups. But nobody is one extreme or the other. We're all somewhere in the mix. So, for example, a hot constitution is someone, you're dressed in jumpers and woolly boots and hats and gloves, and they're swanning around in their t-shirt and shorts. That's a hot constitution, and they don't like hot drinks. They only like cold drinks, and they can't see why anyone could possibly be cold. And then you can have the complete opposite, and that's an extreme. And then you can have someone complete opposite who is always cold. They've always got jumpers on, but whatever the weather, they can't bear the cold. They only have hot drinks. But then you can have someone kind of in the middle. And I remember one patient in particular I saw, and she appeared to be cold. Everything about her, she was dressed in cold weather clothes, and so on and so on. And I said, well, what do you like to drink? Because it's always a useful question to ask. Hot drinks, cold drinks. Oh, she said, I've got to have loads of ice cubes. I like crunching ice cubes. So she was hot on the inside. So it's not always obvious. Not always obvious. But she was boiling hot on the inside, cold on the outside. Lots of inflammation in her gut. So that's what I had to treat, was the heat. So you can't completely rely on what you see, but what you see is usually useful. So we can have hot, cold. We can have wet and dry as well. So someone who is a dry constitution might have dry skin, dry hair. They might, sometimes they're dehydrated. But other times they're not dehydrated, they're just peeing it out, or they may be short of oils. A damp person will have maybe runny nose, maybe damp skin. There's so many, and you can combine wet and warm and dry and cold, or cold and hot. Dry and hot. You can combine them in any way you like. The useful thing then is to then say, right, if this person is dry and cold, what's going to be the worst food for them? Raw salads. That's going to be awful for them. They need to be eating soup, porridge, casseroles, stews, and root vegetables. That's what they need to be eating. Whereas that hot person, I mean, how many hot people do you know that love their really hot chilies? There's something wrong there. Yeah, so they need to stop eating their hot chilies and go to the raw salads. Yeah, it's about eating for your constitution is really helpful. Ayurveda has similar advice. Chinese medicine has similar advice. Greek humoral medicine also has similar advice, but we've not quite lost it, but it's, it's not well known now. So I tend to simplify and just say hot, cold, and wet, dry.
Yeah, humoral medicine is not so well known. I'm more familiar to it being an astrologer, but but that's why I was interested when I saw that it had crept into your book, and I thought,
It's very important. As a herbalist, it's really important to understand someone's constitution, because if you give a hot person heating herbs, you're just going to make everything worse. So, for example, if you've got someone with skin disease, eczema, something like that, you need to establish if they're hot or cold, because if you give someone who is hot and with eczema heating herbs, their eczema is going to get 10 times worse, because eczema can be hot or cold. It doesn't matter, so it's so important in choosing the herbs as well as choosing the diet to know someone's constitution, because you can just make everything worse.
And I find it so interesting that you talk about how they may look like one thing on the outside and be something else on the inside, because I do remember when I was studying medical astrology, coming across that concept, where the chart was showing, okay, well, that's what it looks like, but no, you need to look over there instead, because what you're seeing is not what's actually going on. And so it's a fascinating thing in and of itself that you're seeing that, as you're practicing, that there's the surface and then there's what's under the surface, and we need to look at what's under the surface. I love this as a model for understanding what is making people feel unwell, because it treats everyone as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's quite an important thing, that just because you have eczema doesn't automatically mean that this is what's wrong with you. Yeah. We know that there are certain things that cause it, but which one is it, and how does that fit in with you, and which is the remedy that suits you, rather than it being an off-the-shelf, here it is, remedy. So I think that this is a very encouraging book that you have written, because it explains everything so beautifully and so clearly. And yes, it will require people to read it once or twice, I think, because it's so packed with information. But then you can always dive in when you want to look something up very quickly, because you've organized it so well. So, Christine, have you got, I think a good way to end this is, what are your top 3 tips for a healthy gut microbiome? I know I'm putting you on the spot there.
You are. So top 3 tips for a healthy microbiome. Number 1 is eat the right diet. Make sure you're not eating something you're intolerant to, and don't overdo the inflammatory foods. Number 2 actually is avoid the ultra-processed foods. I think that's really important for a healthy gut. And number 3 is use fermented foods. So, I mean, I'm always giving people recipes to make sauerkraut, kefir, kombucha, make your own. Put them in your diet. Make sure you use them every day. It's far better than, if you want to take probiotics, do, but it's much more expensive, and it's far better to use fermented foods in your diet every day.
And in actual fact, you would think that this is so difficult to make, but it isn't. No. It really isn't. And once you start making kefir or buttermilk or whatever is your preferred fermented dairy, or your preferred fermented vegetable, it's just so easy.
It is.
It really is.
Yeah. A big part of a consultation when someone comes to see me is telling them how to eat and recipes and giving them ideas for making them themselves. I love it when I can get someone inspired to make their own fermented foods and so on. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Christine, for your time today. And a reminder to everyone that this fabulous book that we have been discussing is called Digestion, the Key to Good Health. And this is what it looks like. I will be putting a link to it in the description box. Now, Christine, if people want to find you, how do they do that?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't got a website at the moment. I'm told that my son's going to sort one out one of these days. But I am on Instagram and on Facebook, so that's probably the easiest way to find me. And it's under my own name.
And is it your name on Facebook?
Yeah, just my own name. Yeah, so I'm fairly easy to find. One actual thing to say is that my book is still has a 20% discount on at the moment from Eon.
Aha.
But only for until the 11th, so then only for the next 4 or 5 days, and the code is DG20, and then you can get the 20% discount direct from Eon, who are the publishers.
Okay.
They've also got the same on my other 2 books, one on sleep and one on inflammation, again only for the next 4 or 5 days.
Wow.
If you want it, get in there.
Thank you so much, Christine.
No problem. Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. A reminder that I now have a Substack up and running, and amongst other things such as astrology and plants, I'm also writing the Teddy and Mummy Tales, which is really about those little moments in life between me and Teddy, my dog. So there's lots in there for you to explore and enjoy. Do subscribe, and do subscribe if you haven't already to this particular channel. Until next time, goodbye.